all of you who are attending this regularly scheduled meeting of the Garner Town Council. This is a work session, so our process is a little different tonight, and this is a time for reports and discussion of a variety of different events. Usually we don't have many votes tonight, so thank you all for being present. I assume you're glad to be inside and the respite from the heat outside, so settle in and we'll get on with the meeting sure enough. I'm going to ask our town clerk, if she will, to call the roll at this time.
Mayor Marshburn?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Vance?
Here.
Councilmember Matthews?
Here.
Councilmember Singleton? Councilmember Dellinger?
Here.
And Councilmember here.
Okay, thank you very much. And it should be noted that Mr. Singleton notified us earlier in the week that he would request an excuse from the meeting tonight since he's on a family vacation, I believe, out of town. So that is so noted, and that's the reason for his absence. Council, you have before you the agenda. What say you regarding adoption of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, motion made and properly seconded to approve the agenda. If you favor that, would you vote aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no, and there is no opposition. All right, I'm not aware of any presentations tonight. Ms. Clerk, is that correct?
Correct, sir.
Okay. So then we will move right into the discussion and report section of our agenda this evening, and we have a very important item, number one here, the Jurgen Park Phase 1 Picnic Shelter and Playground. And let's see, is anybody from planning introducing our guest? Or, yeah, I'll recognize our park director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for giving us the time tonight to bring to you an update of the concepts for the playground and the picnic shelter for Jurgen Park. You met with the consultants, I want to say in March, to bring the concept, and based on your feedback, the concepts have been refined. And I'm going to ask, first McAdams will be presenting the playground, and then Hopwood Architects will be presenting the picnic shelter. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Shweta Nanakar, who is the project manager from McAdams, and she will give you the run through.
Okay, thank you. It's good to see you back again.
Thank you, Maria. Good evening, Mayor Mashburn and Council. Great to be here again today to share with you all the update on the playground design for Jurgen Park. We have a short presentation to share with you the updates from the previous meeting, and we have also included a fly-through to show you how the playground will eventually look like. Okay. So just to refresh everyone, this was the image that we had included in the adopted master plan. What you see on the screen is the space in between the soccer fields that is used for grading components, and we have since then updated it to include an embankment play area in this as a playground component. So what you see on the screen is this updated drawing. The orange areas are where we have included the play structures, and this is on a higher ground where our shelter building is, and this slope goes down to the soccer fields that are on this side. And so along this embankment we have these series of play spaces. We are calling them the pathways to endless discovery. So children will have an opportunity to go from the lower level to the higher level using different paths and loops and enjoy these spaces. And so every time they come to the park for soccer play and watch their siblings play on the soccer fields, they can use these different loops and have a different experience every time they are in this space. So this is what the overall play area will look like. One thing I would like to point out is the colors for the play structures that we have chosen are the town of Garner colors. So they probably look a little bit different on the screen with the dark blue almost looking like black, but it should be the Garner blue color will match close to that color based on what vendor has available, and then the orange color that's in the logo that you have for town of Garner. So this will be uniquely Garner playground at this destination park. Again, you can see how that embankment play is set up. This is the topmost location, and then you start to go down the slope and use these different spaces. And as you reach this play area, this is where the next set of soccer fields are on the lower level. So just a few close-ups of this area. This is the area for our littlest of the users. The playhouse here is for our 0 to 2-year-olds. This larger structure is for 2 to 5-year-olds, and what you see in the background is for kids 5 to 12-year-olds. This is another view of that same space, littlest of the kids in that little playhouse space, older kids 2 to 5-year-olds on the bigger structure here. This is the tower, about 20 feet high. This accessible from a ramp where you can access it with wheelchairs. The roller slide is considered an inclusive play element, especially for kids who have sensory needs. And on the bottom, you can see we have a buddy seat. So if the kids need assistance from a caregiver, they can roll down, move on the side until they get the assistance, while other kids can keep playing on that play structure. And so there are several play panels that will be incorporated at this level and also at the ground level, where kids in wheelchair can access that. And then we have the higher level for kids who want more adventurous play in this play space. Another view of the same space. The rickety slide, this is another component where kids with sensory needs can use these spaces because they really like to use their pressure points on their hands and feet and really enjoy these types of play elements. This is the view at the bottom level where we have these boogie boards that can double as a seating space for adults and kids, or they have a little rocking experience to them, so multiple kids can sit on it and rock at the same time. This is the play structure. It's a spinner where you can also bring in the wheelchair, so kids with special needs can also use this space as needed with neurotypical kids. And this is another structure, again, multi-age group, can use it from anywhere from 2 to 12-year-olds can use this bottom level up to the highest level. So the last element we have is the fly-through.
Let me open it. Okay. Sorry, it's not in.
That's what we have today to share, the update on the play area. Any questions? If not, we have the...
Okay, yes, we possibly will have some, so I'll give council an opportunity to ask questions or make comments. I'll start with Ms. Behringer. Okay, Mr. Dellinger.
Thanks for the presentation. just looking at the space and sort of the area on the outsides, and then sort of also, again, thinking about the areas around these fields, I'm thinking that we may need more shade structures, maybe not full shelters, but definitely more shade structures, since it'll be a long time between the trees come up, just so people can get out of the heat and maybe sit along the walls under shade while they're watching their kids or something. So that's kind of some feedback I think would be helpful.
Duly noted, Mr. Dillinger. This play area is also close to the shelter, so we will have that opportunity until the vegetation grows up, for people can stay at the top of the levels in the shelter, and they can watch as the kids are playing down on the slope. So they supervise them from the shelter building. Thank you for that comment.
Okay, in reference to accessibility, and for the audience that may be watching, the various structures will be accessible by wheelchair, correct?
Correct. So we have all these paths that you see. There will be at least one path that goes through the play space that will be the right slope to be ADA compliant.
Okay, Mr. Matthews.
Good presentation. The inclusive playground splash pad is going to be over at White Deers. Are we launching this in and about the same timeline, or how's that playing out?
That's a question.
I think that will be somewhat similar in schedule, but Yeargun might be a bit later because this is a much more complex project. But they will be sort of, within a year, 2 years of each other.
Okay. Thank you.
Can you explain what the surface, what the composition of that will be? Is that concrete or something else?
So it's a combination of several elements. Anything that is within the fall zone of the play structure will be poured in place safety surface, and anything that's beyond that could be the paths are all concrete, and then the outside spaces could be vegetation beds, turf areas. We also have boulders in some locations that will be integrated with the landscape. But what you see, the light brown on the drawing, that's all the poured in place safety surface for the fall zone for each play structure.
All right, thank you. Second round, any other questions? All right.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Looks nice and cool out there right now to me on the picture. But,
Okay. Hello, Mayor Mashburn and the Town Council. It's great to be back here. To show you where we are now that we've had time to coordinate with all the different disciplines and made some kind of design adjustments working through the picnic and restroom shelter. So we've maintained the same concept that we spoke about last time, that you guys were drawn to, this kind of idea of a multi-armed branch that can address the different historical markers, some existing, like the Dupree House and the Yeargun House, and then other kind of key locations in this kind of future park as well. Go through all those little arms and how they work again, but I also wanted to kind of show you where we are today with the kind of plan after those adjustments. These are some of the slides that you saw previously, so this was the kind of roof plan before, and this is where we are kind of now. The geometries have changed a little bit to make kind of shortcuts and better views through the structure. It's still, this is what we had previously. We've tried to kind of tighten up as much as the footprint in areas to be kind of as efficient as possible. And then you'll see like a lot, if I just go back, the bathrooms, the restrooms have kind of gotten a lot more detail as we're also serving kind of electrical spaces for the athletic fields. So this was the previous roof plan, the new roof plan, and then just kind of generally programmatically how those different kind of branches work. So you've got the 2 restrooms, as well as kind of a main access kind of entry pavilion, and then a picnic area with a viewing side to the left. And so those a potential kind of furniture layout, how that could look once it's activated. And then the restrooms, we've spent some time working on these as well. We hope that these will also be kind of playful for children as well. So just looking at kind of simple tiles and different colors to kind of mark the zones. But you'll see that navy blue area is the universal changing kind of room, which is kind of I think it works well. It kind of gives some privacy. The sinks, urinals, and water closets, and then there's the family restroom and the mechanical closet that will not just serve the janitor, but all of the electrical power needs for this phase 1. Women's restroom, so kind of very similar, all stars. And then this is just to kind of say on the final count of the fixture count for each restroom, we have 9 female stalls and then 6 male. That's kind of what's dictated by the 9 female stalls. That long way to say serves about 1,500 total people. So we think even with soccer tournaments or whatnot, that that these are properly sized for not just the playground, but obviously for the soccer fields. This was the view that we showed you guys last time at the schematic design. This is what it's looking like today. I'll kind of show you some of those little bit details, the things that have changed in a second. This is the main entry view. This is the kind of current entry view, a view from the playground before, and then a view from the playground now. And underneath the kind of I think this was everybody's kind of responded well to the roofscape underneath the roof structure, and now you can see it with the kind of expression of the structure frames that we're using. A lot of it's also kind of looking at those adjacent farm structures. So if you look, this image up on the top left, where you can kind of see how the structure works, the main beams, the kind of roof joist, and then the actual metal roofing. You can see that all from underneath, as well as the kind of direction of siding, the scale of some of these elements we tried to respond to. You'll see this is kind of a key image for us as well, to kind of get the atmospheric quality of those barn structures, so that you have this kind of transparency, allows some kind of breathing area, fun kind of shadow play. But we're starting to look at elements in the structure that can reference these and also kind of provide directionality and some shading. So this was one of the references, or these are a couple of the references actually, but if the one on the top left, the Gooseberry Park one, has a very kind of expressive structural, it's almost decorative, this one. I think what we're really excited by, and we brought a larger model just to show you how the structure works. We've been working a lot with our engineer to develop a structural system, but we love the fact that this can be kind of expressed, so when you're underneath it, similar to the Gooseberry, but I think in a little bit more of an honest way, how the structural system actually kind of works to create those roof lines. And then when I was looking, when I showed that image of the barn structure with the kind of lattice work, we also want to make sure that we are creating frames that will actually frame these historic structures as well. So some of that gets kind of tied in, you'll see in a second in the kind of final renderings. And a very kind of simple material palette, wood siding, the metal roofs that you see on a lot of these farm structures, the CMU walls just for the restrooms. We think they actually can be quite beautiful. That also just gives some durability to those to the restrooms. So this is kind of where we are today. So you can see the metal roofs, the kind of structural system is being expressed in this kind of light green color at the moment. I'm sure we'll try a bunch of other colors, and basically whatever Maria thinks works best, we'll probably just put that in here. But you'll see the screen walls that are kind of, one of the comments last time was that no one wanted to see the restroom doors, so the screen walls on some hand, like in the parking lot view, shield that door, but you can still see through it, obviously. It also kind of creates these portals, so you'll see just like the last 8 feet of some of these volumes will make that, so rather than just a roof structure on stilts or columns, that we're trying to bring some of those walls down in a limited amount, but just to create some of that mass and that effect, so that you'll get different layers of space. So this is looking from the picnic space. You can see the little screen wall on the right, and that's the main kind of access. The structure is expressed and kind of, you know, I think looks really beautiful. It's one of my favorite parts of the project, to be honest. The CMU walls are where you see the restrooms, the playground to the right, and the parking to the left. Now this is a view from the other kind of viewing side, looking back at the entry. So you're seeing the parking lot, the asphalt beyond, and those kind of playful roof lines. And then this is the view basically from the dead center looking at the women's restroom. But this is the kind of key view. Obviously, when you enter the structure, you see it'll really frame the Jurgen farmstead quite nicely. I think we have technical drawings if we want to go through, but I think that's the best image to kind of end on. And then just also to show you some of the process as we were playing with different forms and amounts of branches and directionality. We brought some of the early study models, kind of a smaller scale model that gives you a feel for the material finishes. And then the larger model is a bit more abstract, but it's just a structural model. It's basically everything but the roof system.
Oh, okay. Are you ready for questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm all finished. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. I'll start with Mr. Matthews, if he has anything.
Quite a lot. From the last presentation, this looks much better and getting a better feel for what we're going to be doing out there. So looks good to me. It looks good.
Okay, go down. All right, Ms. Beringer.
It's growing on me. Every time I see it, I like it a little bit more, so thanks for the presentation.
Wonderful.
Okay, and Mr. Dellinger?
I'll just say from a process and feedback perspective, this is a breath of fresh air. Something like this develop. It shows that architecture and design aren't dead. And you've really sort of created this work of public art through this. When I first saw it and saw those slats, I was like, that feels like a barn. And then you showed that image, and it's a barn. And so it really speaks to the strength of of design. And when you get kind of inputs from all over, you end up with something that's really, really more than anybody could have really imagined. So good job.
Thank you. Thanks.
And Mr. Vance?
Much better than before, and I have no further questions.
Okay.
Oh, I do have. I don't like that color.
Other
than that interior color is a little, yeah. But
that's an easy fix. That's an easy fix.
Again, I guess I'm hung up on the type of material that's being used, but yeah, the round seating and stuff in there. Again, is that some kind of a hard plastic, or maybe it's not?
That's just a placeholder, just to show some kind of loose repositionable seating, but that we haven't really looked at at all, and we'll take direction from Maria when it comes to all the furniture in there.
Okay. All right. I agree with council. It's significant in its detail and improvement, I think, sure enough. Anything else as we go around? Mr. Manager, anything you have?
A couple of questions. Can you explain the material on the interior, like the slats under the roof? Is that wood or?
Yes.
And then the fluted walls, what is that material made of?
So what we're hoping to do is have basically a tongue and groove wood ceiling. So as clean as we can make that would be ideal. But I have to also say this is also quite beautiful when you see this roof in the top left where it shows the structural system. So depending on where things fall out, it could also be a little bit more expressive and show the roof joist, so you can actually see how that structure is made. The screen walls are, in fact, wood. We've been looking at different directionality. We're hoping all of this wood, it will weather and kind of silver and gray over time, so that'll even make it more homogeneous on the exterior. Those are just mint those kind of layers of spaces, as well as a little bit of screening out parking in the restroom entrance. The fluted wall for these restroom walls above the CMU, that's also, we're looking at, those are all naturally ventilated spaces. We don't need that much ventilation. We're working with our MVP engineer. There'll be a percentage that needs to be vented. So those will get much smaller, and either that'll be just a flush metal panel or just something that will tie in nicely with the ventilation kind of cutouts. So that's also kind of we've sent what we thought that we don't need as much as we're showing. So we're kind of going back and forth with the MEP engineer. We're pressing basically the CMU on the exterior. You'll see, like in this bottom, on the left-hand side, you'll see the wood sidings on the CMU. So anywhere that the building faces outward, we want that effect of the wood siding. So it references some of those barn structures. On the interior, on the circulation pieces that, let's see, back. So you'll see, like on these two, this is the kind of the main entrance, and then you'll have this kind of shortcut past the women's room and a little shortcut from the men's room. There, where we've kind of peeled that wood siding off, so it's just the screen walls, and then we're exposing the CMU so that you can kind of also, again, see the layers of the construction. But it's also just a much more durable surface and finish. So in terms of the materiality, it's really just kind of a wood, a stone, or the CMU, and the metal for the roofing.
Thanks.
Okay, anyone else?
Yes, I see that you brought models for us to view, and the purpose of the models are for what?
The models are kind of just to show, I think I was joking with Mr. Mashburn, Mayor Mashburn, last time I was here, that we would try 100 versions of these branches. They're not more than what I brought today, but some of them show that just the roof structure on columns, so you can see the effect of that. Some of them, there's other ones that show more solid walls. There's some that have screen walls. So it's all part of our kind of process to see, like, what's the right balance. We had some earlier ones, and that we worked with Maria and her team, that it was becoming too solid. It was too enclosed. It wasn't open enough, not enough transparency. So then we kind of went back and we started, really that image that you pointed out was such a key one for us in terms of the quality of that space in some areas, that we wanted to at least reference or abstract in a new way and not have it literally be, tobacco barns for curing tobacco, but allowing views, light and shadow, and some ventilation. The structural model is one that we've worked on for a while, just because, to be honest, the structural system and our engineer was like such an exciting moment for us, because we thought, God, just the structure alone, when this thing is erected, is going to be quite beautiful. It kind of tells the story very kind of clearly. It shows the different types of farm structures that we're referencing. The main entry hall is the kind of steepest vertical volume. And then as it gets to the support spaces, like the restrooms, the roof kind of flattens out and the pitch gets a little bit shallower. You see that also at the Jurgen farmstead. They have 4 or 5 different type roof structures and typologies of little outbuildings. So we brought that. A lot of times I think it's just exciting also to see a physical, the renderings are nice, but for us, we really love making the physical models, and you can kind of look around in there and see how the space will be used.
Is that going with you once you leave, or is it staying with the town?
I mean, the town, we're going to document them still. We just kind of finished them up, but the town, we're more than welcome. The town wants to use them or keep some here. That's not a problem.
All right, thank you. Another round? Anybody? Anybody here? Okay, well, we're sort of enamored, I think, with the model there, but at any rate,
all right, great.
We get a chance to hang on to it a little while. Be nice. Okay, if there are no other questions, we'll hear from the next presenter. Thank you, sir.
So as a wrap up for our next step, we need your blessing to continue with this scheme, with this design, so that we can get the sort of the ball rolling on the construction documents and all the stuff that goes with getting a project to move forward towards opening day eventually. So just need your blessing on this model or on this concept to go forward.
Yeah, I see in the agenda packet the Recommended motion is to consider approval of updated concepts for large picnic shelter and playground areas of Jurgen Park Phase 1. So, Council, if you've satisfied your questions about this issue, I think, would a motion be in order? Or?
Before we go too far along, did we appropriately mention Mr. Singleton, Councilmember Singleton's concern? Since he's not here, he did send some.
I've shared them with the architect. I think Mr. Singleton had questions about some of the metal materials proposed and how they would work, and I think we'll give him some examples so he can take a look at that. And then he also offered, and I don't know if you were all copied on that this morning, the idea of, how could we document the history of North Garner and of Jurgen Farm and sort of figure out how to connect it visually to the site. So we'll be, and those are, I think, two options that we can certainly pursue.
Incorporate some art and some photos and things like that.
Yes.
He said,
I think there's some opportunities
storyboards or whatever. He said,
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure it became part of the meeting.
Right. Yeah, he did email, and I know he and Ms. Maria conferred back and forth in regards to some of his suggestions, so very good. All right, well, let's give some direction at this time, Council, maybe with a motion regarding your approval of the concepts.
Mr. Mayor, I'll start it off. I move that we approve the updated concept for the large picnic shelter playground areas of Jurgen Park Phase 1.
Second.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further discussion on the matter? All right, if you favor the motion, would you vote aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposition, no. Yes, none.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank McAdams and all the folks who worked on this for sure. Okay, I believe we're now ready to move to item 2 on the agenda, Forward Comprehensive Plan and Text Amendment, number ZTA 2302. And Mr. Triesenberg, are you going to lead this, sir? And I believe we have some members of the Planning Commission here with us, so if you would let us know who those people are. Some of us know them, okay, yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, tonight we have 4 of our commission members here. A 5th was here not too long ago, Miss Sherry Phillips, but she had a family emergency, so she had to step out. But we have Mr. Mike Voiland here.
Thanks, sir.
And Ms. Jahan Hodges, she's our newest member. And we also have the chairman, John Blasco. He just arrived, but he went back out to go grab his reading glasses.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, excuse him for that.
Sure. Yeah, I asked him if he wouldn't mind just giving when we get to the appropriate time, just to give you all a little firsthand kind of review of some of the things that the Planning Commission talked about and really focused on with their discussion the other night at their meeting. But just to give you just kind of a general overview, the Commission did, at the end of their meeting, vote to give their endorsement to the plan with a few items to be still further revised by Mr. Nooncaster and his team. So he is still working on those items. He has had a number of other projects kind of spin up in his world, so balancing time right now is I think a little bit challenging for him. So, but I do want to make sure that we give him plenty of time to devote to getting those issues kind of wrapped up. So in that light, we'll come back to this again, but in thinking about the schedule going forward and the couple of revisions that perhaps still need to be made, looking at then kind of giving you the walkthrough tonight, potentially allowing the Planning Commission just to see what those revisions are at their next meeting on August 14th. That would then allow us to talk with you all again at your meeting on the 22nd to go over those and potentially targeting a public hearing maybe then for September 5th as opposed to the 22nd of August. like I said, I'm not opposed to speeding it up, but I do want to make sure that everybody has ample time to feel comfortable and for Matt to get everything squared away that we need to get to. So with that being said,
I have a comment, and I do want to hear sort of a walkthrough, and then can I hear comments from Planning Commission? But I spent 4.5 hours today reading both versions of this. Mm-hmm. Now it's not the version we're going to review that's coming to us. So this goes kind of back to my question before about version control on the document and making sure that there's a version number and a date for that version on every page of the document so that we know what version we're talking about, whether it's the public says on page 106 I saw this, and say, oh, what version was it? Because in going through, I made notes, and if the pages shift now, or if there's a part that comes out that was in there, you know, so knowing, so I think we should go through this briefly, but if there are going to be more changes, and not know what changes are, because, you know, there are significant differences between the document that went to the public hearing and what came back from Planning Commission that merit kind of a lot of discussion. But since we don't have that final Planning Commission version, I don't know that there's too much conversation that we can have.
So I think largely the further revisions will be limited to just 2 areas. And so I can highlight those for you as well, just going through here. I didn't plan to like focus on every little highlighted change in version 2, but just to hit the highlights, because some of them were admittedly spelling errors or the wrong word being chosen by the editing program, and then acknowledging some things like Fort Liberty, Fort Bragg, making sure we got both terms in there, and a few other things. But yeah. Right. So we are looking at tonight the version 2 from July. And what Mr. Newcastle did is he did highlight in the document the areas that were changed. And I'll be glad to go to any section that you like, but like I said, I do want to just kind of focus on the main sections here. So within the initiatives, again, he tried to go back in and add some parameters and context for you know, what these employment centers should look like, how they should be structured, kind of minimum acreages to expect and building sizes. So you will see that here primarily in initiatives 4, I believe all the way through 8. So again, looking at the Regional Employment Activity Center, you know, looking at, again, how much of that employment area should be there to really make it a center, and how much acreage you should generally be looking at to see when putting one of those centers together, where those vertical mixed uses as opposed to maybe more of the horizontal mixed uses should be. And then again, also kind of giving a sense of the residential component, whether it should be more primary or secondary to the other uses, and where that should be located. If you have more ideas on, you know, if you're looking for something a little more prescriptive, then I would want to go back to him with that feedback. But this was his first go at trying to give some general structure to these centers. So you see here then when you go to the regional retail, again, you're looking at 250,000 or more square feet, but again, as opposed to employment being the focus, now retail is the focus. Not quite as compact per se, looking at, because you probably will need more parking, but 25 acres or more, but again, depending on the features and how you want to structure that. Multifamily is brought in here at this point and could be incorporated into a portion of the center. as a supporting land use, so folks that can actually walk from home to shop. And again, though, keeping standalone residential kind of out of the center and being secondary and closer to the periphery with good open space. And then they kind of start to transition down. So you had the 250,000 or more, then coming into the regional transit activity center, looking more in the range of 50 to 250,000 square feet of building, 2 to 12 acres, more vertical focus, having again at least that one anchor business. And again, similar to the regional retail, having the multifamily again can be integrated into that center of the area. Again, and here he says, yeah, vertical mixed-use buildings are encouraged in the center. Once again, relegating that standalone residential to the periphery and being secondary. Then when we come down to the community activity centers, so the other three were kind of our biggest centers. These that are more scaled at the community level, again, some of the same characteristics as a regional transit, but in the connectivity or in the community activity centers, you're not going to have that BRT or commuter rail functioning. But again, in the range of that 50 to 250, 5 to 25 acres, small scale retail office space, again, incorporating that as much as possible, and again, still focusing on one anchor business at the very least. Not so much integration of the multifamily in this particular, but again, kind of pushing some of that to around the area that would be more in walking distance. But again, secondary in the center to commercial office or open spaces. And then finally, as you're coming down kind of in terms of scale, here at the neighborhood activity level, development centers in the range of 5,000 to 50. So there's kind of three tiers of overall size. Acres, again, very small scale, residential or residential, commercial and office kind of all mixed together. But again, still secondary in the center. So everywhere we have this kind of center, once you've defined that, keeping the residential out of there unless it's stacked vertically, and making sure that you're having that focus on really that sense of place and bringing the residential around it. So that was the first major batch of changes.
I have a question on, if you go back to page 35, so while the text insertions are highlighted as changes, graphical and map changes don't have a sort of similar track change, and I noticed there were significant differences between the public hearing version of this and then the version that came out of Planning Commission, and that there were different activity centers that council hadn't seen previously. And so I had kind of questions about that and what those were. And I mean, if we don't want to go into detail because there'll be another version, that's fine, but there are some very significant changes in the number of activity centers from the version we saw.
Yes, so on the regional activity centers, there shouldn't be any change in number, but they may have been shifted slightly. I know for this regional retail, we did ask to have it shifted to kind of be more representative of the existing White Oak shopping area. It had been further down in this area, but we didn't want to take the emphasis off of mixed use throughout here because that also shows up in the typology map. So we did ask whether or not it would be appropriate to have still maintain a community activity center here. So something that would be more supportive of additional development down here that's not, that can have its own focus and not have to be kind of gravitated towards that retail center. I
guess my question is, between the version that went to the public hearing and then Planning Commission, what was the impetus for the changes of the regional activity centers, the community activity centers, and the neighborhood activity centers?
Sure. So some of that was us going through the map, just the existing parcel map with Matt and his folks. Available, but in the hopper that have been approved now that might influence where those would be better situated. So some of those were shifted due to that. And then we also just took a step back and also looked around at just kind of a geographical, hey, this area doesn't have a center. What kind of center would be appropriate, and where could we introduce that area of focus? So again, some of it was just, hey, we're missing in this area, or here the land assemblage might be better suited.
It's just is a significant number of changes in a short period of time. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, so like I say, most of them were shifts. I think we maybe added three neighborhood centers, and then maybe I think the one community activity center.
Okay, any other questions for Jeff? Phil, anything?
And we might not be able to answer it now, but I know we've talked in the past about the ETJs, and I think we've got them identified here. Far as where we're at now, far as the state is concerned, and they were looking at making some changes, and they're not going to make some changes. So, do we have any updates on that at this time, or is it pretty much the way it was, I guess?
I just checked today, and there's no hearing scheduled, so there's been no action on that bill at this point. And although they're scheduled to be in Thursday, it doesn't appear that they're going to be doing much more than work on the budget if they appear. So it's kind of in a holding pattern. We had proposed an amendment to allow for ETJ expansion in Wake County, but because there's been no hearing, that has not been introduced at this point.
Okay. I guess that, thank you for switching this mic. I appreciate that.
See you back.
You're good. All right. So in regards to that then, so and I guess it goes back to you, is if we wanted to do anything for us expanding the ETJ at this time, are we still under the old rules? So is that something we could do, or do we have to sit back and wait and see whatever's going to shake out at the state level?
You could try to initiate something, but the existing bill language that passed the Senate has it frozen into place as to what it was June 1st. So unless you would have to lobby to be able to grandfather anything that we would start after June 1st of this year. So the law hasn't changed yet, so you could still initiate it, but you might not get anywhere with it.
Okay.
Mr. Matthews, one of the things that we're doing in the interim so that we don't lose time while we're waiting to hear what the legislature does is one of our key steps to this is having dialogue with the city of Raleigh about how utility provision is going to be handled in our application. And so we do have a meeting scheduled next week with the leadership of Raleigh Water to talk through how what we're proposing for our ETJ expansion and how we would work with them to be able to answer the questions that are going to need to be answered in the ETJ application about utility expansion, because that, as we all know, will be one of the key factors in our application.
Okay, thank you.
A follow-up, and I guess to Phil, sort of, I think he's getting to, if the legislation doesn't go anywhere and dies, we want to be able to move. That's kind of what you're...
That's sort of my question, is we hung out to dry with those guys, or can we, it sounds like if we got that working with Raleigh, that's going to be an integral part of what we present to them as far as expansion on our ETJ, that we will have capabilities, and City of Raleigh's on board with what we want to do.
So we're trying to make use of this interim time with as much as pre-work as we can do until we know exactly where the legislature is going to land on this.
Okay, thank you.
Anything, Ms. Berger? Mr. Vance?
Anything?
No? Okay, let's see, Jeff, where are we?
So I've got five major areas that I wanted to highlight for you this evening. The second is kind of the area, again, this is version 2, pages 56 through 59. So there was some going back in and just trying to add a little bit in here to the descriptions of the typology centers. Again, we have the typology map that gives you just a very brief kind of one sentence, but then here it gets into more description of what these typology areas consist of. And so Matt has made some adjustments there. And then also going into the corresponding crosswalks to make sure that we had the right zoning districts enabled for each one, as well as building types and a few other things. So again, staff went through and said, hey, for instance, in a neighborhood area, can we have the corner store? Can we have, you know, little veterinary office or something like that? And neighborhood mixed use was not in the list, so we asked him again to, you know, make sure that that was in there. Not that that's something we expect to use a lot, but in the right case, we want to have that tool available.
A comment on the use of single-family homes and the mixed use, and I think it's not necessarily a bad thing, but we're not sort of highlighting what proportion. So you want to sort of have transitions, but we don't want someone to come in with an application for horizontal mixed use and have half single-family homes. You kind of scale it out. So I think there might be room to say no more than 10%, or I don't know, but we don't want it to be the predominant feature of a mixed-use project. So I'll make that note.
So this one was not near as much involved text-wise as it was actual use of the tools that are in here. Then section number 3 that I wanted to highlight for you tonight is down on page 109. And this is something that we had a considerable amount of discussion with the Planning Commission. And so Matt is going to work on this. Planning Commission has asked him to provide a little more of a contextual approach to this idea. And what he's put in here, the graphic down here kind of gets at it, but in a slightly different way. The text really refers to this kind of street width to building height ratio. And what that ratio tries to do is establish a minimum from an architectural kind of layout standpoint, a person's feeling of being enclosed and enclosed comfortably. Vary depending on, you know, the height of the buildings and the type of street environment that you have. But that obviously isn't the same in each area of town. So originally he had just put in kind of just a blanket minimum, but we're asking him to go back and give a little more context to say, okay, in a suburban, typical residential setting, this is what you should be looking for in terms of width to height. And then the question also was, the text kind of makes it sound like it's just street width that we're talking about, but it's really from the face of the building to the face of the building. So it also includes your front setback areas, because that's part of the, the sense of space to the person walking on the street as well. So we've asked him to go back and take a new look at that, and I did want to just highlight that to you. So that's one of the 2 major things that he'll be working on for the next piece. But you see here too, it's not always necessarily a street. Whenever you have get into these more urban style developments, you may have all the buildings fronting on a courtyard or a square, but you still have that same sense of being in that space. You don't want the buildings so dramatically high compared to the elbow room you have.
Could you go to page 61?
Mm-hmm.
That's, we're talking about intensity uses, intensity map. think it's 61. I still have some reservations about the level 4A. Low rise, 1 story to 5. One is not really a rise.
Right.
And trying to think of a way to sort of put minimums in place when we're talking about rise. And if you want to go taller, but it's like you can't really get, and kind of goes to another comment, have the bigger concern I have with the way the comprehensive plan references mixed use is it talks about horizontal mixed use, which is fine, we do some of that.
Yep.
And vertical use, and actually, but puts them on the same level of preference and impact on the town. And they're not equal. And, you know, I think there's some refining of preference to say,
elevate that.
yeah, and the wording just makes them very, do this or that. And we want to say, no, we prefer this, you know, depending on referencing other documents and stuff. But, so I think that's a change we can make. I think that speaks to also to the single family home issue where what do we mean by mixed use? So when a developer asks us, we can say, these are the 2 types of mixed use. Type here, this type here. So that's kind of, it jumped out, and that kind of dovetails with the level 4A.
Right.
1 story shouldn't kind of be in there. So that was the only other thing, just the mixed use and the intensity, and trying to encourage that verticality in the appropriate places and not accidentally have it misrepresented that, oh, horizontal mixed use is okay.
Yeah. No.
Another note on page 73, there's a change on the employment center and retail centers that allow stacked mixed use, but that change isn't reflected in the residential crosswalk. So it's added back in, it's added into here, which is, I think, good, because you're mixing the retail for that mixed use and the employment center, but those building types aren't included in the residential part, and I don't know if I'm misunderstanding how those are supposed to work, or, so on, I think 58, yep. So the stacked multifamily is not listed under employment center and retail.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's just, and I think the other one's the right one. The employment center one is what was intended, but it's just not, okay, thanks.
Now that's a good catch, because we were definitely kind of focused on, hey, this is missing in the in the non-residential. We want to make sure we have that, but yeah, to go back and make sure that they correspond so we don't get differing.
And the other comment on the vertical is when you do more vertical, there's a lot of talk about creating public spaces and plazas, and verticality promotes open space and plazas and green space. So it kind of gets you more than just the development. You actually get all these other elements we're trying to promote in the plan. So,
right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other council members have questions or comments on this topic?
We've visited 2 more pieces, and I've got 2 more to share with you.
Okay, go right ahead.
So the 4th major section, after that whole building height to width discussion, really is some changes on where he added a lot more about the housing compatibility, affordability, and getting rid of the missing middle terminology and just calling it small scale housing options, because that's pretty much what it is. So again, from pages 110 here through the spotlight on page 115, he looked to kind of beef that up and provide a little more substance in terms of what some of our goals should be. So adding and in some cases rewriting, in some cases adding to these sections, and trying to give, again, some guidance as to some things that the town should consider pursuing. So I can go through those, or if you have any comments or questions on that. this admittedly
Those
was
are
more
very,
of a,
I think those are very good additions. And a lot of feedback I've heard about older neighborhoods and having a basis for that in here is really helpful. So thank you.
and then finally, on page, whoops, I'm sorry, I went too far. On page 128, again, because of the cost of services study that we've been doing in parallel to it, we did not have this spotlight before, but now he's added in version 2 here on page 128 and 129, this spotlight on long-term financial stability. That discussion that we've been having with the finance director, Mr. Beck, so I won't belabor that either, but wanted to let you know that that has been put in here, so please feel free to read through that and get some feedback there, but I think that helps to summarize that kind of in a good 2-pager. So then I just wanted to again invite John, if you just want to kind of whatever you would like to say in terms of our discussions the other day that you'd like to share with the council.
Welcome, sir. Good to see you.
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We've, as the Planning Commission Chair, I do want to just first of all say I really appreciate the effort of planning staff and their efforts in this. I appreciate the efforts of my fellow commission members and their efforts to review this and process this. I also really appreciate your all's effort to review and process this. This is a lot of information. It's a big undertaking, and I think we've done a great job, and we're close to the finish line, and I think we'll be there soon. But we really appreciate all the effort that's gone into this, and with the hopes that it really drives our town and our planning process forward. As Mr. Triesenberg said, there's a couple areas that we really focused on our most recent discussion. One being the street to building height ratio. Really focused on that one about making sure that the language in the text was clear and that it was understandable, not for just us, but for the developers. We recommended that there be some additional graphics provided, just so it was really clear as to what that was getting at. We really discussed about those opportunities where it's not just the building face to the street, but also thinking about those green spaces, those plazas. How do those really affect that feel? That idea of a green space, of a public realm area really helps bring the scale down to that pedestrian level and creates a comfort. So we looked at, how can we improve that language to really address those issues and not just your typical building and the setback, let those other things influence that language as well. And then also talking about some of the affordable housing aspects. That was a great thing to see added to the report. We were very appreciative of that, and that was very helpful. Along using that and sort of as a whole thinking about character, let's push the idea of affordability of that workforce housing, but let's not forget the character that Garner has in that context. So kind of as a bigger picture, we as Planning Commission tend to look at things on a very granular level, looking at individual parcels, individual developments. So really thinking about how our development moves forward, not just as a typical development, but as the affordable development moves forward, and how do we respect the context that surrounds us. We're making some big, bold plans with this plan, big statements, but we can't forget about what's adjacent. So we really encourage planning staff and ourselves internally as we look forward as to how do we respect that context? How do we make sure that what we're proposing, what we're seeing proposed really fits within the context of the neighborhood. So whether that's infill development, whether that's affordable housing, whether that's a new neighborhood center or retail center, let's make sure that we're really thinking through these ideas of context and making sure that things really fit. And then finally, we talked a little bit about the floodplain. There's a section in there that in the mapping that talks about this protection of green space, this protection of creating this network of floodplain, which is protected by state law, protected by federal law as well. But how can we take a step beyond that? Not just the buffers, but how can we look at maybe thinking, encouraging our engineering staff and our planning staff to really ask for more in terms of stormwater control. So often, the developer's required for, to treat the 5 or 10 year storm, but we're seeing that those are not the case anymore. We're seeing more, 25 year and 100 year storms. So are there opportunities around, developments that are adjacent to floodplains, adjacent to creeks and streams and bodies of water that we can really push that request to treat more stormwater that's above the requirements, those base minimums. So really thinking about how do we protect that, how do we create that as a amenity for our community. And then we also really good public comment. Mr. Jeffrey Swain, who is a former Planning Commission member and chair, spoke, I believe, at 2 of our meetings. And he brought up some really good points, and his points were really more focused on implementation. Let's make sure that we have this great plan in front of us, but how do we implement it? How do we start to set up goals and objectives, and how can we create this sort of matrix and metrics for implementation? So not just tell a good story, but how do we check these boxes off and actually make progress? And so I think just as we move forward and get close to the finish line, really start to think about, what are those metrics that say that, yes, we've implemented what we set out to do. So I think with that, those are sort of the key comments at our most recent meeting. And like I said, we appreciate everyone's effort on this, and we appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it.
So I might just ask you, John, and thank you and your committee for the good work you do. I believe I heard you say you think we're pretty close to the finish line, or the Planning Commission at this point doesn't have any what I would call substantive or big issues that you feel like need some additional attention.
No, I don't think so. I think that maybe the biggest thing is thinking about those metrics and that implementation strategy. But I think we've addressed the majority of the things. I know Mr. Dellinger has brought up several good points this evening, and I think with some of the a few more edits, we're just about there.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Waska?
A comment on the floodplain stuff. I think that's really important when we're getting more storms and flood events. We can't stop global warming. We can't stop these things, but we can mitigate against them. So I think those are really strong comments about that stormwater containment, but also runoff. And again, I preach verticality, but it leaves more space for natural absorption and all these other types of things. So thank you for those comments too. Thank you all, the whole board, for their hard work as well. I see all that.
Pleasure.
Any other council member questions, comments?
I'd like to echo what Mr. Dillinger said for your hard work and all that you've done. And the whole Planning Commission, I know you have a number of members of the board here now, just other commission here now. Just want to say thank you for your hard work.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, sure. Good. Mr. Triesenberg, anything else?
Yes. So John gave a nice little segue, I think, just into a hope. I'm happy to discuss as much as y'all want, but into the topic of the text amendments. There were a couple of things that came out of that discussion that would probably be appropriate to maybe add a couple of things into the proposed text amendment package. One of those being sitting down with our engineering department and talking about those stormwater requirements. Are there some tweaks that we can propose and make as part of this First Amendment package? And then secondly, again, the whole discussion around affordable housing, and can we, there's not a lot that you can put in, but we can look at some examples from places like Durham, and I think Asheville has done some things as well, where they do put some language into their ordinance to try to incentivize the provision of affordable housing and developments. So I feel like we could also take a look at that if that's something that you're interested. Again, that has to be a voluntary thing from an ordinance perspective, and most folks will give some kind of carrot to go with that, whether it's a density bonus or something of that nature to try to encourage these developers to do that on the front end rather than through a kind of a condition and all of that. So those are two things that we had identified potentially to add to the text amendment package. Again, that was in your staff report, in your package for tonight. What I did is I put the previous memo in there to kind of give a little bit of editorial guidance as to where we went with each thing that we discussed at the work session last time. Thanks to Mr. Dellinger, to your discussion or suggestion on the activity center, that actually helped cut down some proposed changes by eliminating the need for the new district. We did pull out research and development was kind of the big thing that we focused on in terms of adding a new use. That currently was covered very loosely in a category called other industrial. And so that included some other warehousing and other, harder, say dirtier, but the noxious industrial things that you kind of want to reserve for a special heavy industrial district somewhere and not as part of something that could be in a mixed kind of center. That was the big shift in terms of what I presented to you at your last work session, and developing some actual text for these suggested amendments. Again, I'm happy to go through, or I'm happy to also just entertain comments and questions and further thoughts. Again, happy to look at the stormwater parts with engineering before the next time, and also to look at maybe some affordable housing incentive language as well. And then anything else that is burning on your mind that comes out of the comp plan that you really feel we need to try to have in place sooner rather than later?
I was just going to ask a question about, I think the NNO just did an article relating to affordable housing, some comparison, Durham, Raleigh perhaps, but I believe I saw a statement that placed Garner somewhere behind, I think, Raleigh and Cary in Wake County in terms of issues relating to affordable housing. Did you see the article, or
I did.
Have any comment on that?
Yeah, Rick and I had a good little discussion about that. What was challenging to me when reading that was just understanding what their definition of the gap was. And once I kind of realized how they were framing the gap, then it kind of made sense to me, because if you're thinking just about supply, you wouldn't expect us to be number 3 in terms of being short on supply, if that's all you're talking about, because we know Cary and Apex, with their higher median values, they have less. Mm-hmm. And we have this good stock of older homes that tend to be more in that range. But the fact that it was looking at what it was really saying to me was, yes, we do have what we considered affordable, but it's also all occupied. There's none available. It's all been snatched up. And so from that perspective, us having a shortage that gap seemed to start to make a little more sense. Sure. But it took me a little while to kind of piece that together.
Thank you for your comments.
I had the same questions as Mr. Triesenberg. I wasn't understanding how they were arriving at that conclusion, because in the past it's been quite a bit different. Sometimes using the same words for different meaning gets confusing.
Okay, I think one of the issues we are hopefully agreeing on is to move this process forward to a public hearing on the 10th of September. Is that the date I heard earlier on? At the recommendation?
Is it the 5th? That would be my suggested kind of target date at this point, would be to move it to the 5th. And then let me work with Matt, because I know I'd hoped to at least have him virtually tonight, but he had already had a commitment for another council meeting with another project. But let me get with him, because I would like him to be present at one more of these to help kind of bring you up to speed, because he's the one writing, and he can probably convey it better than I can. And see if we can't have one more, just him being able to talk to both Planning Commission and to you before we have that public hearing.
Okay.
We still got the public hearing process.
Yeah, and I spoke with some residents this weekend about the process and the timeline and the ability to inspect the changes. And there were some recommendations to make some hard copies available to the public of the final document. Some people were having trouble reading it on a computer or so they were having challenges there. So that sort of, in terms of fitting it into the timeline, it looked like it's getting pushed back, which is good, which means I think prioritizing the plan elements over the text amendment, you only have limited bandwidth to make sure we get the plan done. Yes. And then I think it's really great we're looking at these text amendments so early, so that versus a lot of times it's kind of coming during pretty quick. So this gives a lot more time to review them and get feedback. But the hard copies was a recommendation. Another was doing a little more outreach on the final version that sort of emerged from Planning Commission.
Sure.
And maybe going into some communities, going to some HOAs, or, instead of having them have to come here to watch, is to sort of just kind of do a little more outreach on the nearest final version. I know John says we're near the end. That's always like the hardest. That last 10% is the hardest part to nail down, but I think we are pretty close. But I think with a lot of the changes that have happened since through Planning Commission and other feedback, there was some feeling that the public wanted to have eyes on that and give any final feedback on some of those changes.
Yeah. If there's any groups out there that would like to have a meeting, feel free to let them get in touch with me. I'll be glad to set up a time to go meet with them.
Great.
Whether it's at their regular HOA or something special.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
And we'll get we'll get at least like 3 or 4 print copies for anybody who wants to stop by and pick one up. We'll have some.
All right. We'll wait to hear after you've conferred further about the public hearing, okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask whether or not council would like us to get a print copy of the final version for council members? Yes. Okay.
I would prefer that.
We just want to make sure that we added that to our count of the next print run that we do for that next edited version.
Version 3.
I'm sorry?
Version 3.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time tonight.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time and the work put into this, okay? Council, I believe that covers the main items on that portion of the agenda. And Mr. Manager, we are ready for your reports.
Okay, Mayor, Town Council, just a couple of things to mention. The pending agenda report that's in your packet, showing the upcoming topics in August, which, as I always say, is subject to change, but it's just to kind of give you some indication of what's coming forward. And then one event on July the 27th, I believe that's Friday night. Downtown Sounds will be on the GPAC back lawn from 6:30 to 8:15, and it will be, the group is Show Diggers.
Okay, yeah, very good. Thank you. All right, let's see, Ms. Jones, you didn't have any report tonight, is that right?
No, I just want to let you know that I'll be at the Municipal Attorneys Conference next Thursday and Friday, not this week, but the following week.
Okay, thank you. Council, I believe we're ready for council reports, so start to my left with Mr. Matthews.
Nothing at this time, sir.
Okay. Ms. Berg?
Yes, I have a few things. It seems I'm always talking about grass being mowed, but I've noticed that the grass at the corner of 70 and Timber Drive for Garner Town Square is pretty much out of control. And if we could get some attention to that, to get that mowed. Also, down at the corner here of Aversboro and Vandora Avenue, right in the edge in the corner where the power pole is growing up, is very unsightly, so we could get that addressed. Question, I think, for Mr. Hodges. Do we know any more about the condition of the concrete plant on Garner Road? It's obviously no one there. Can we find out?
We'll see what we can do.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay. And the utility boxes I've mentioned a couple of times around town that are obviously not being used. They're in bad shape. Some of them have fallen down. Some are on the railroad right away. Some are in other places. What can we do about that? Who do they belong to? And can we have them removed if they're not being used?
We can relay that on to the utilities. I mean, it's various utilities. We'd have to see who they belong to in particular, but it could be any number of, tele, power, whatever, internet. But we can, we maybe can write them something and tell them to maybe do a check or audit of unused boxes and maybe
that would improve
how to clear that.
Yeah, that would improve. In a lot of places, they're along 70 in some places, and some places are along the railroad, but they're obviously not in use and very unsightly. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Dellinger, any reports?
Yes, I just want to thank the DGA and Shayla and Nate helped out too. He's like, what do you call him a name for? Food Truck Rodeo was a big success on Friday. Good turnout. Also want to thank Public Works for all their help setting up and tearing down, and Fire Station 1 for coming out and helping with some more bodies out there. It was really hot, so that was really great. It was a great event. About just a couple items. Is there any progress on getting the speed limit change on New Bethel Church Road? I know it's 55 east of Hebron and 45. And I know they've already changed the speed limit on Wynn Road. That was a request that those residents had related to the Pulte development, but they've already got their speed limit changed. So kind of would like to see if we can go ahead and get New Bethel moving slower, actually. And I guess I have a question. We had a resident ask about I don't know what Ms. Jones can say about the burning on the Pulte development down New Bethel. Is there an update?
I think Paul Padgett, the inspections director, has a little bit more information than I do about the permits, but I think I relayed to council when I did speak to the Pulte representative. He said if the contractor was bringing in anything from off-site, they would be told they weren't allowed to do that anymore. But the intention was for them to burn the vegetation from that site as they clear it.
Good evening. So I contacted NCDEQ, and they have made changes to the statutes, well, I should say the legislatures, so they can actually bring product onto the site for land clearing 4 times a year. DEQ did send someone out. They sat an hour. They didn't see a truck come in. So we're still checking on, going by there every day just to make sure. We did verify with forestry. They had a permit. They had a lapse, and then they got another permit the day that we went out to check on everything. So we're working with the county forestry to see if they're going to do anything there. So
thank you so much.
Okay, Mr. Vance.
I don't have a report, but I have questions. One pertaining to SB 675, which is currently being reviewed by the House. Are we able to find out where it is in the House?
So it's been referred to the House, but they have not had a committee hearing on it yet, and it hasn't been scheduled. Again, what it sounds like from the league is that they're on a break right now, and that until the budget gets finalized, they're really not taking up many other bills other than veto overrides that they were focusing on as well. So I keep monitoring it. I'll let you know if that does get scheduled. But as they gear back, my understanding is, I think it's August 7th that they plan to come back into sort of more full-time session. But if you do talk to any House members, we just don't know what committee it's going to right now.
And there was another one, was it HR 409?
Yes, yes, House bill, that was the accessory dwelling units, and that's similarly stalled in the Senate. It has not been scheduled. So, but I'll keep an eye on those and let you know when they come back around.
Wow.
Okay, thank you. System managers, anything? Okay. And the mayor would just sort of second the comments made by Mr. Dellinger and others who may have attended the food truck rodeo and all the people who were there. It's nice to get to see people downtown and enjoy the event in spite of the heat. I think a good time was had by all the folks there, and look forward to the next one. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, and on that point, it just jogged my memory. There was a very good article, news report on the social district. Yeah, a very positive news report about how it's coming along, how things are going with it, and everything, and really good. Really good.
Okay, I missed that. Yeah, thank you. All right, council, I believe I've recognized everybody. Is there anything else for the good of the this work session? If not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion probably made, seconded. Let me just before we adjourn again thank Planning Commission for your work, and for those of you who will be able to be here this evening, we appreciate that. So, council, you ready to vote? If you're in favor of adjournment, would you vote aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, declare this work session.